Once again, we welcome everyone here. We're so grateful to see you all. And as we've been doing for quite some time, we've been studying out of Dr. Brad Harrub's book, Convicted. So, Lord willing, we're going to try to wrap this up this evening. This study that we've been on for roughly about a year and a half. And it seems like we've covered a lot of things, but really, we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more that we could look at. So that should give us encouragement too. Like we haven't even touched all the evidence that's out there. Not even close. Probably haven't even looked at 5% of it. And you see how much we've looked at and how long it's been. So we are kind of in the middle of right now. We're talking about some great men of science. And so there's a couple more that we want to mention tonight as we wrap our study up. Because we looked at that quote from Richard Dawkins, who said that, anybody that believes in God or doesn't believe in evolution, he said they are ignorant, stupid, or insane. And so I would love to get him in here and ask him, so all these great men of science, you think that's what they are? Because all these guys have a couple things in common. One, they're men of science, and two, they were also men of God. They were people who believed in God, they believed in the Bible, they believed in the Genesis account of creation. And they saw no contradiction whatsoever between science and God. So evolutionists today say, well, no, they're totally separate. These men said, no, they really fit together perfectly. And so we want to look tonight. Last week we finished up, we talked about Robert Boyle. So tonight I want to start off, so there's 3 or 4 more that we want to look at real quickly. So I want to talk about a man by the name of Blaise Pascal. And he was, of course, a scientist like all these guys were. He made advances in hydrostatics and differential calculus. Makes my head hurt just to say those type of things. Not something I'm very fond of, but very important, scientific discoveries. And so that's what the scientific community knows him for. But he's also known for a famous concept that he came up with known as Pascal's wager. And some of you, I heard of this years and years. I might have been a teenager or maybe in my 20s. First time I heard about this, I heard about it before I knew what it was. And I would hear people say, well, Pascal's wager, and I didn't really know what they were talking about, but then eventually studied it on my own. And so a wager is like a bet, or he's saying, okay, in this case, if you're not sure whether or not there's a God, and you're trying to figure out, should I believe in God or should I not believe in God, he came up with, again, what's known as Pascal's wager. So he said, if you're trying to bet on whether God exists or he doesn't, he said that your best bet, the most logical bet, you should bet that there is a God, that God does exist. So obviously that's what he believed. So another man of science who believed in God, believed in the Bible. And so he drew it out in a big square with 4 quadrants. Okay? And on the top, you've got 2 choices. You believe in God or you don't believe in God. And then with each of those choices, there are 2 different outcomes. Okay? And so you looked at this, and so he said that if you, first of all, let's say if you believe in God, if you choose to believe that there is a God, then you have 2 possible outcomes. He said, number 1, if you believe in God and there is no God, then what have you lost? Nothing, really. Didn't really cost you anything. You believed that there was a God, but then it turned out he didn't exist. Well, okay, no harm done. You didn't really lose anything. On the other hand, if you believe in God and he does exist, what have you lost there? Well, what have you lost there? Nothing. What have you gained? Everything, right? Eternal life, right? So there's the big prize, the big reward. So if you believe in God and he doesn't exist, it doesn't really cost you anything. If you believe in God and he does exist, you hit the jackpot and you get the eternal reward. Now, let's take a look at the other side. It said, on the other hand, if you wager that God does not exist, and that turns out to be true, he does not exist, then what did you lose? What did it cost you? Nothing. However, if you believe there is no God and it turns out he does exist, what did it cost you? Eternal torment, right. So he said out of these 4 outcomes, 3 of them are either neutral or really good. There's only one really bad outcome, and you have to not believe in God to go that one. So he said it makes logical, scientific sense. If you're not sure and you're betting on it, you better bet that there is a God, because you don't have anything to lose by doing that. But he also felt like the evidence simply supported it. But he said, after all that, if you're still not sure, well, this is the way you would figure it out. Okay? And so he's known for Pascal's wager. But again, a man of science who also very much believed in God. Then we come to Samuel Morse. Now, this is a guy that some of you probably at least have heard of. Does anybody know what Samuel Morse did?
Invented the telegraph.
Okay, invented the telegraph, right? And then the language that you use is what y'all say? Morse code, right? The dots and the dashes. You go, why do they call it Morse code? Because he's the guy that invented it, right? So he invents the telegraph and the language that goes with it that we know as Morse code. He did a lot of other scientific things as well, but that's the thing that, he's the most famous for. But like all these other men, he saw no contradiction between science and God. He was also a man of God as well. So if you guys would, turn in your Bibles back in the Old Testament, turn to the book of Numbers. And we want to look at Numbers 23. This is on page 245 of my Bible, which that helps you not at all. But Deuteronomy, Numbers 23, and I want to look at verse 23. Would somebody be so kind as to read that for us? Numbers 23 and verse 23.
Surely there is no enchantment against Jacob, neither is there divination against Israel. According to this, it shall be said of Jacob and of Israel, with hath God wrought.
Okay, so that last sentence there, what hath God wrought? When Samuel Morse perfected his telegraph, he sent the very first ever message by telegraph. Guess what it said? What hath God wrought? That was the very first telegraph message, which at the time, of course, was incredible technology. Okay, because this was still, Pony Express. You live in New York, you want to communicate with somebody in California, you've got to send a letter and get it there, and then they send you a letter back, and that whole process is probably going to take 6 months, 8 months. Now you have almost instantaneous communications. That was a big deal. This was a major scientific breakthrough. And so that was the first telegraph message. What hath God wrought? Well, he picked that because he's basically giving God the credit for his invention, right? God allowed me to do this. My mind really comes from the mind of God, and he enabled me to do something like this. And so he's given credit. And it's interesting that he chose to quote a scripture where he could have said anything at all, right? Alexander Graham Bell said, come in here, Watson, I need you, right? That was his first message on the telephone. He could have said anything, but he chose a Bible verse to give credit to God instead of taking all the credit for, oh, look what I did. He's saying, God allowed me to do something like this. He blessed me with the intellect that I could come up with something like this. So it's a really kind of a cool message that he sent. But again, a man of science that has no qualms about believing in God and believing in the Bible and quoting the Bible with his invention. Now, he also has quite a few quotes, but here's one I wanted to share with you. He wrote this toward the end of his life. He said, "The nearer I approach the end of my pilgrimage, the clearer is the evidence of the divine origin of the Bible." Well, he must be one of those insane, crazy people, according to Dawkins, right? I mean, how could you say such a crazy, stupid, silly thing? But he said, the older I get, the more I become convinced that the Bible is true, the Bible is accurate. I've not discovered anything in all my scientific experiments that would lead me to disbelieve in God and disbelieve in the Bible. So again, another man who thought God and science go hand in hand. They go together. They are not polar opposites. Well, let's talk about James Clerk Maxwell. This is a guy a lot of people probably maybe haven't heard of. He's not as well known as some of the other guys, but he made a lot of advances in the field of physics. He developed classical electromagnetic theory. And one of the interesting things about him is he died the same year that Albert Einstein was born. And Albert Einstein became a great fan. So everybody's heard of Einstein, right? But few people have heard of Maxwell. But Einstein was a big fan of Maxwell's work. And Einstein himself said he believed that Maxwell was a great scientist, in his words. Maxwell was a great scientist. Well, coming from Albert Einstein, is that a pretty good compliment if you're in science? It's about the best compliment you can get, right? Because Einstein's widely regarded as the smartest human that ever lived. And so when he says, hey, you do a good job with science, that's like getting an Academy Award or whatever, you know? And so he said, yeah, this guy's a great scientist. Well, what did Maxwell do in addition to electromagnetic experiments and stuff? He spent a lot of his time, a lot of his writings, refuting, criticizing, arguing against Darwin and the other evolutionists, basically saying your theory of evolution is absurd. There's no way that it is scientific. There's no way that it works. The truth is in the Bible. The truth is not in evolution. And this is a man that Einstein said, oh, he's a great scientist. We get no qualms about putting God together with that. Well, let's talk a little bit about Einstein himself. Again, born in 1879, the same year that Maxwell passed away. Einstein, as we said, regarded probably as the smartest man that ever lived. When he died, they took his brain out. And I'm trying to remember, I used to know where it was. I don't remember, I lost it. But anyway, they've got his brain somewhere, and you can apply for grants to get a slice of it. And they study it. They try to figure out what made him so much smarter than everybody else. And they've not come up with an answer to that yet. But he just thought in a very different way than everybody else did. So they're trying to see if there's some physiological reason in his brain. But so far they haven't been able to figure that out. But, you know, tremendous intellect, great scientist. Now, don't want anybody to misinterpret. We would not say that Albert Einstein was a Christian in any sense of the word. I don't have any indication that Einstein believed in the God of the Bible. I don't really recall him ever criticizing it either. He just really didn't say much about it. But it is interesting what he did say. Because, again, everybody, he's the smartest man ever. And so you have a lot of people who try to convince, well, Einstein was the smartest ever. He didn't believe in God. He was an atheist, and so we should be too. Well, was he an atheist? Not really. So if we look at what he believed, as I said, I'm not trying to misrepresent that he was a Bible believer, because I don't think that's the case. But he did believe in a supreme intelligence. Somebody created the universe. He didn't think it just popped into existence out of thin air, like the evolutionists tried to, the Big Bang, you know. No, Einstein said there's a mind, an incredible mind behind all this. Okay? And so, look at a quote from him. I'm going to give you a couple of quotes from Einstein. One of them I have here, and then I've got another one that Maurice actually found. It's a really good quote too, so it's not up there, but I'll read it to you. But notice what he said. He said, but also, everyone that is seriously involved in the pursuit of science. So there again, there's a critique right there in that sentence. It's like, if you're serious about science, not fake science, but real science, if you're seriously involved in the pursuit of science, becomes convinced that some spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, one that is vastly superior to that of man. So Einstein, again, not trying to misrepresent, oh, he believed in the God of the Bible. No, I don't think he did. But he believed in a God of some kind. He said, there is something, there is a supremely intelligent being that is far above us that designed all this. He said, there's no way I can believe that this universe just created itself out of nothing. No, somebody built all this. So he wholeheartedly believed. He was not an atheist. He did believe in a God of some kind. I'm just not sure it's the God of the Bible, but he believed in a God of some kind. Okay, now here's this other quote, which I hadn't seen this one. Maurice found this when he shared it with me. Came across this. So listen to this quote. Einstein said, in view of such harmony in the cosmos, which I, with my human mind, am able to recognize, there are yet people who say there is no God. Now, that's not the whole quote. I'm going to stop right there for a second. All right? So listen to what he's saying. I can see the harmony of the cosmos. In other words, what do you think? What would be another way to describe? There's a harmony in the cosmos. What does that mean?
Synchronization.
Yeah, there's a design, right? This is not random. There is intelligence behind this. Okay, so he says, I can see that, but he says, there are yet people who say there is no God. Now, what is he implying with that statement? That there is a God, right? So he's kind of incredulous. He's saying, look, if you seriously study science, yet you still think there's no God? That's kind of what he's saying, right? He's like, I don't believe you could come to that conclusion, and yet there are people that do. That's what he's saying. So he's kind of incredulous at that, showing that that's not the conclusion he came to. And just in case you're, well, are we sure about that? Yeah, here's the next sentence, right after he said that. He said, but what really makes me angry is that they, in other words, the evolutionists, the atheists, what really makes me angry is that they quote me for the support of such views. So that fires me up. They always bring my name. Oh, well, Einstein's an atheist, and he's saying, no, I'm not. Why do you guys keep saying that about me? You always bring me into it, trying to prove that there is no God. He's saying, I think it's incredible for you to believe that there is no God. There's some kind, again, I don't think he believed in the God of the Bible necessarily, but he believed there was some kind of God, there was some kind of intelligence. And what we've shown, hopefully, over the last year and a half is the evidence overwhelmingly, it doesn't support other false religions. It supports Christianity. I'm just not sure that Einstein really spent a lot of time looking at the Bible because that just wasn't his thing, right? So again, I've never seen a criticism. There might be one out there. Maybe I just haven't seen it. I've not ever seen where he said, well, the Bible's a bunch of baloney and it's not true. I don't think he said that either. He just really didn't spend any time with it. But all the mathematical stuff that he was doing and the way that brain was going, he said, everything that I've seen convinces me there is a supreme intelligence that designed all this. It didn't randomly create itself. But it really made him mad that the evolutionists would say that he would support them. He's saying, I don't support them.
We see that all through history, even from shortly after the beginning. Different cultures, spaced far away, not having contact with one another, they come up with an idea of a God of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And not, I don't think any of them ever come up that we came from nothing.
No, that's just the scientist, right? So yeah, and a lot of their, even if they don't go along with the Bible, yet a lot of their they have myths and that. Yeah, they're very similar. Like they all have an account of a great flood, for example. I wonder how they all came up with the same thing. Maybe because it actually happened, right? But yeah, they all had, every civilization had a sense of there is something greater than us that created us and did all this. And as we've seen, that's where all the evidence leads. It doesn't lead in the other direction for somebody that's honest about it. And that's what Einstein is saying. He's like, I don't see anybody that's a serious scientist that could come to any other conclusion. Of course, somebody created all this. He's saying, I don't know who it is, but somebody much greater than us did this. Well, does that contradict the Bible in any way? No. Like I said, I'm not saying he was a Bible believer, because I don't think he was, but it certainly doesn't contradict what the Bible tells us. But he does contradict all the atheists that try to use him to say, see, all the smart people believe in atheism. Well, Einstein didn't. Isaac Newton, we talked about him before, one of his quotes, he said, atheism is so senseless. I don't know why anybody would be an atheist. I mean, none of the evidence really supports any of that. So, once again, all these men, they're all considered giants in science. They founded many fields of science that we still study today. They made a lot of significant discoveries. They all held a belief in the God of the Bible, with the exception of Einstein. But all the other ones, they all believed in the God of the Bible. And Einstein believed of God of some kind. Okay, so none of them believed that the universe created itself, like the evolutionists want us to. And none of them, like Danny said, none of them believed that we came from monkeys or anything else. We were created the way we are. And everything was created fully formed. Okay, so again, I would love to ask Richard Dawkins, do you think all these men that we talked about, are they ignorant, stupid, or insane? Love to ask him that question. How do you explain all these great men of science who also believed in God, and nothing they discovered made them question this book? They go, well, you know what, I found out this, and that proves the Bible's false. None of them believe that. They said everything we found, just if anything, it supports what the Bible says. Okay, so that's pretty good evidence as well. So, as we kind of draw this to a close, we had some goals at the beginning of this study, and so one of them is, I want to say this in the strongest terms. Okay, do not let anyone, don't let anyone tell you or certainly convince you that belief in a creator is stupid or unscientific. That's what they try to do to us, right? You have to be a moron to believe in God. You probably believe in witchcraft too, and you're superstitious and blah, 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 and on they go. And they try to shame us. You need to be smart like us, believe in the guys in the white coats. Don't let anybody tell you that. Don't let anybody convince you that you are less than intelligent because you believe in God. Okay, I would argue that the opposite is true. Okay, those people that ignore the overwhelming evidence for a creator that we've looked at, and as I said, we've only really scratched the surface, but they want to ignore that evidence, they're not being very scientific. They're really not. They try to beat us over the head with science, science, science. You're not really being scientific because you're ignoring the evidence because you don't like where it goes. Maybe they're the ones that are ignorant, stupid, or insane.
Bingo.
Do what?
Bingo.
Yeah, it's not us. Okay, but they're going to do their best to convince us that we are the ones lacking intelligence. We are the silly ones, the superstitious ones. No, we're the ones that are following the science. I believe in God because that's where the science led me. Even though the science leads them there, they ignore it because it's leading them to a conclusion they disagree with. They don't want to go in that direction. And so they would choose to argue against it. So it's just amazing to me, in a field that we call science, that's supposed to value the evaluation of evidence, yet you have all these people who willfully ignore that evidence, like I said, because it leads them in a direction they don't want to go. So we're going to manufacture evidence on the other side, and we've looked at a lot of that. True science, without evolutionary bias, it points to a creator. So we are being scientific, we are being logical, we are being rational when we say, yes, I believe in this book because everything I've seen and found, it confirms what this book says. So how is that being unscientific? But that's what they're going to try to tell us. Well, turn in your Bibles to Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1. The evidence for the existence of God is undeniable to any honest person. And so we want to remember what Paul told the church at Rome. So Romans chapter 1, let's look at verse 20. Romans 1 and verse 20 says that for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. Clearly seen. Being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So people that, I believe in God if he'd come walk down the aisle here. If God would just appear, if he'd part the Red Sea again, just show me a miracle, then I believe in God. There's people that say that because he's invisible, so there's nothing to prove that he's there. Well, what is Paul saying here? What does it mean they're without excuse? What does that mean? Excuse for what? For not believing in God. God, if you'd just flown down from heaven and visited me at my house, I'd believe in you. If you'd show me a miracle, I'd believe in you. You didn't show me anything. Paul says, for the invisible things in him and the creation of the world are clearly seen. He says, everywhere you look, you can't walk without tripping over evidence for God. He's left us all kinds of evidence, all kinds of clues. Yet you stubbornly, he's got to walk in the room if you want me to believe in him. Like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, my truck parked out there. I am 100% positive. I have no doubt in my mind, somebody built that truck. Did I see him build it? What do you think? No. Well, then how do you know they built it? Because I know that truck didn't build itself. I'm positive somebody built it. I can tell just by looking at it, right? So there's evidence. I don't have to see the guy in the Ford factory put the thing together to know there was a guy in the Ford factory who put the thing together. With all the evidence we've seen, somebody put all this together. We don't actually have to see him do it. The evidence is everywhere, and that's what Paul is saying. So you're without excuse. On the day of judgment, you will not have an excuse. Well, God, if only, there won't be if onlys. God's going to say, I gave you every piece of evidence you needed. You just didn't want to believe. You didn't want to see it. Because again, for the honest person, you want to see it, it's there.
How do they explain how their self were created?
How what?
How their own being were created?
How do they explain it? Yeah, you can't really explain it, right? I mean, it's pretty miraculous.
Exactly.
If you think about it, right? And again, it's like we said with a truck or a car or a cell phone or a laptop. Those are complex machines who could not possibly construct themselves. Well, the human body is far more complex than any machine that man has ever invented. And we talked about the whole idea, months ago, we talked about, Frankenstein and the whole thing about trying to create life. And man's tried to do that over and over and over. We can't seem to figure it out. We can clone things, like we can recreate but create one from scratch, can't do it. You're using material that's already there, right? Well, I can put all these tissues together. Where do the tissues come from? Well, if I've got the blood, where'd the blood come from? Right? So you can't, nobody's been able to just create life out of nothing, which is what the evolutionists tell us. So it's a complex machine that defies any kind of explanation along those lines. And so that's what Paul's saying, right? You're not going to have an excuse. There's nothing you'll be able to tell God on that day to justify not believing in him, where he's going to give you a pass and go, well, okay, I'll let you into heaven anyway. It's not going to happen. He's going to say, I gave you overwhelming amounts of evidence. All you had to do was open your eyes, open your heart, be open-minded about it. You would have seen it. The people that don't see it are the people that don't want to see it. Okay? And we know that in other aspects of life too. Sometimes, something bad happens and people delude themselves. No, that never happened. Well, yeah, it did. You just don't want to see it. Or flaws we have in ourselves, right? And somebody will try to tell, hey, you're doing, no, I'm not doing that, because we don't want to see it. Doesn't mean we're not doing it, we just don't want to see it. So that's what Paul's saying here. You people that don't see it, because you don't want to see it. If you're open-minded and you're willing to go out and investigate, you're going to find an overwhelming amount of evidence that somebody created all this, and somebody created us. And that's what we've seen for the last year and a half. So hopefully that in our study, we've been able to demonstrate that our faith in God is not a blind faith. God never wanted it to be a blind faith, and it's not. It's based on evidence, solid evidence. To me, it takes more blind faith to be an evolutionist than it does to be a Christian. You really got to believe in fairy tales to go with that one, because the evidence just isn't there to support it. Well, look at Psalms chapter 14 and verse 1. Kind of sums it up. Psalms 14 and verse 1. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that doeth good. Okay? So God himself said the people that do not believe in him, what are they? They're fools. Okay? They are fools. And then in the New Testament, Romans 1:22 says, professing themselves to be wise, all the guys with PhDs after their name, and they are smart people in a lot of ways, right? But it says they became fools. They profess themselves, hey, listen to me, I'm a genius, I know what I'm talking about. Well, if you don't believe in God, God is saying you are the fool. It's not the people that believe that are foolish. It's the people that don't believe are foolish, because, again, of the amount of evidence that I have left to show you that I exist and I created you, and it's overwhelming. So now the challenge is, what do we do with this knowledge? What do we do with it? Well, as I said, it had basically three goals. One was to try to convince you, don't let them convince you that you're stupid, silly, unintelligent, superstitious. Don't let them do that. We talked about the other thing is we want to reinforce our faith. We want to know you don't need to believe in God just because grandma did. And I think some people do that. It's just, whether they're in the Lord's church or in a denomination, you get all kinds of people that they're in that church because their parents went there, their grandparents went there. But you ask them, well, what do you think about the Bible? What do you really believe? They really don't know that much. They're just doing what their family did. That shouldn't be what our faith is based on. Okay, so this was done to strengthen our faith, to know, I do have science on my side. I have logic and reason, rational thought. That's on my side. I'm not the foolish one. Okay, so hopefully our faith has been strengthened. And then finally, the other goal was so that we can go out and teach others and have an intelligent conversation, and we know what we're talking about. And I've given you 500 examples or whatever. You don't have to remember all. I'll give you 2 or 3. Say, well, let's look at some scientific reasons for God. Just that will get the conversation going, where they will go, hey, wait a minute, this is not the country bumpkin that I thought he was. This guy knows a little bit, right? We've got to be able to talk to people intelligently to show them we got reasons. I'm not just believing in God because I'm some superstitious moron. I've got logical, rational, scientific reasons for believing that somebody created me and somebody created all this. We got to have that kind of conversation. That's how you reach those kind of people. Okay? And so hopefully we're able to do this. So may God help us to educate people so as to turn them away from godless atheism, godless evolution, and turn them toward our awesome Creator, which is what we want to do. That's what Jesus commanded us, go out and preach the Word. So that's what we need to do. All right, any questions or comments? All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed the study, and I hope it's been beneficial for you. And so now we'll start something else. But I'm not going to tell you what it is. I want you to linger in suspense for a while. What are we going to study next? You'll find out, Lord willing. But we'll see. We'll go from there. But anyway, seriously, I hope the study's been very beneficial for you. It's been very helpful for me, because a lot of this stuff I already knew, but I learned some new stuff too in my research for this. I learned some things that I didn't know before. So it has, my faith was already good, but it's even strengthened it. And so I hope it's done the same for you. And I hope it gives you confidence to go out and talk to other people about it. Well, if you would, turn your Bibles to Isaiah chapter 53. We're going to look there in just a minute. So we want to talk tonight a little bit about love and sacrifice. Love and sacrifice. There's a story told of, there was a little boy in elementary school, and he had a younger sister. And she had a disease that was usually fatal, that would kill you. There wasn't really a cure for it. And she needed a blood transfusion. It was about the only thing that you could do for this to have a chance to survive. And so the doctor explained to the parents and to the little boy that he had had the same disease earlier and had gotten through it. And so now his blood would act as a cleansing agent, that if he would give a blood transfusion to his sister, she could survive the disease as well. But he needed to be willing to give the blood transfusion. That was the only really chance that she had, because they both had a very rare blood type. And so that was the situation. The boy was the perfect donor. They might find another donor, but it'd be very, very difficult to do. It's really easy if you just use a brother. So they tell this to the boy. His name was Johnny. And the doctor explains it to him, and Johnny hesitated. Johnny started kind of trembling, and he was scared and wasn't sure what to do. He hesitated, and the doctor said, well, Johnny, what do you think? You willing to give some blood to your sister? And finally, Johnny said, yes, sir, I will. I'll do it for my sister. Okay, fair enough. Good. So the two children are wheeled into the hospital, and they start the transfusion and put the needle in Johnny's arm, and he sees the blood coming out and going into his sister. So they're getting toward the end. The doctor tells them, so, okay, we're almost through. We're almost through. See, Johnny, it's not that bad. It's okay. You know, we're almost through. He'd been scared to death. And then the doctor finally gets the clue as to why Johnny had been so scared, because the doctor thought, well, it's just a blood transfusion, you know. When the doctor said, well, we're almost done. We're almost to the end, Johnny said, kind of trembling in his voice, he said, Doctor, when do I die? So Johnny had thought that giving his blood meant giving all of his blood, and it would kill him. But yet he was willing to sacrifice for his sister. He was willing to die for his sister, which of course was not necessary at all. But the whole time, that's what this little boy, that's what his brain had told him. He thought he was having to sacrifice his life to save his sister, but he was willing to do it. But then they got to the end, and now he's really like, when do I die? The doctor's like, what are you talking about? You're not going to die, Johnny. I'm not. The relief goes over him, right, when he realized, no, this is just, you'll be fine. Your body will repopulate your blood cell, you'll be fine, But the doctor was so touched that this boy had been willing to sacrifice his life to save his sister. Well, isn't that what Jesus did for us? Jesus gave his blood, and literally it did kill him, at least in the human form. He was willing to suffer a horrible death on the cross to save us. Just like Johnny was willing to die to save his sister, Jesus was willing to die to save you and me, not from his sins, but from ours. So look at Isaiah 53, beginning in verse 4. It says, surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we, like sheep, have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. And one thing that just coincidentally that Keisha said to me on the phone this afternoon, she was asking me about, where it says Jesus wept. And it says that in a lot of, there's one for that short verse, but there's a lot in the Bible talking about Jesus weeping. And she said, why is he doing that? I said, well, because he sacrificed for us, and so many people still, figuratively, still spit on him, just like the Romans did, and we turn our backs on him, and we mock him in spite of what he did for us. Well, that would make me weep too, if I had given some great sacrifice for people who didn't appreciate it. So we don't want to be like that. We want to appreciate what Jesus did for us. So if you're not a Christian tonight, you need to be baptized into Christ. That's what he died for. That's the only way to have your sins cleansed and you'll become a child of God. If you are a child of God and you've strayed away for whatever reason, Jesus is weeping over you right now. He sacrificed his blood for you and you've rejected him. You accepted him at one point, but now you've rejected him again. Jesus wants you to come home. He wants you to come back. We can pray with you and for you if you have a need, and we can help you tonight. So if you have a need, please come forward as together we stand and we sing.
Almost persuaded.